እንዴት ከረማችሁ? ያለፉት 10 ቀናት ቆይታችሁ እጅግ ስኬታማ እንደሆነ ተስፋ አደርጋለሁ። እንደዚህ ያሉ ቆይታዎች እንደ እያንዳንዱ ግለሰብ ምዘና ውጤታቸው የሚለያይ ቢሆንም በጥቅል ሲወሰድ የተሳካ ነበር ብሎ
How have you been? I trust that the 10 days you spent here were meaningful and successful. While the outcome of such a stay varies from one individual to another, the feedback we've received suggests that overall it was fruitful. It has been a valuable period, especially for leaders who will guide this Madamar government, to deepen their perspective and reshape a more defined outlook. In today's concluding reflection, I want to highlight what kind of mindset defines a developmental state, how it operates, what it seeks to achieve, and what responsibilities it must carry to deliver results. When we speak of a Madamar government, we refer to 4 core pillars. 1, creating or creativity. 2, producing. 3, multiplying. And 4, refining. What does this mean? You cannot verify quality where little has been created. Quality emerges from abundance. Only when we produce more, when we innovate and generate at scale, do we begin to uncover outcomes worth preserving and improving. To produce more, speed is essential. A person who creates rarely or who delays cannot yield abundant results. When we produce widely and quickly, quality naturally begins to surface from among the many outputs. In other words, quantity creates opportunity. Quality is the result. Through quantity, we not only gain the chance to innovate, we also earn the ability to sustain what is valuable in the long run. Consider, for example, our corridor development initiatives. What we see today is not what it was at the beginning. Our quality benchmarks have shifted over time, and that change happened because we created more. A Madamar government stands firmly on this foundation. Yet today I wish to direct our focus to 2 key questions. First, how have modernity, power, and historical progress been shaped, both globally and in Ethiopia? We must look at the historical paths that gave rise to modern institutions, structures, and systems, extract their lessons, and reflect deeply on the successes and shortcomings within our own context, understanding the costs of lagging behind and the consequences of advancing slowly helps us evaluate where we stand today. If we fail to understand how history has shaped our political and social life, we will struggle to act wisely in the present, and planning for the future becomes even more difficult.
And የመለወጥ የማደግ የመሻሻል ትልም ያለው ሀገር የስልጣኔ ጉዞን ወደ ኋላ መለስ ብሎ ማየት የሚያስፈልገው ዋናው ምክንያት ሳሙኤል ሃንቲንግተን እንደሚለው የሰው ልጅ ታሪክ የስልጣኔ ታሪክ ነው።
As Samuel Huntington said, the history of humanity is at its core the history of power. History is often written by those who held power, not by those who lost it or remained silent. Meaningful progress requires us to examine our blind spots, those realities we fail to see. A nation aspiring to move forward cannot do so by only looking ahead. It must also look back, identify what went wrong, and trace how culture, belief, values, and institutions evolved to the moment. Only then can we anticipate tomorrow with informed clarity.
Abraham Lincoln ስለ ወደፊት ጊዜ ሲጠየቅ the best way to predict
Abraham Lincoln once said, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." We speak confidently about tomorrow only when we build it today. The one who builds strong infrastructure today has reason to expect a better future. The one who sleeps through the present will leave hardship to their children. Understanding the present is not only required for shaping the future, but also for predicting it. Second, how do we build a competent, modern, developmental nation? What is a civilization? Civilization, in relative terms, refers to the stage in which a nation reaches a certain height of cultural and developmental advancement. When we speak of civilization, we are referring to a condition in which citizens are able to establish a harmonious way of life and a coherent social order. Babylonian civilization, recorded in many historical narratives, was among the most advanced empires of its time. The way civilization was defined then continues to serve as a foundation for how the word is understood today. The Greeks derived the word civilization from three related terms, and reflecting on these helps us grasp what civilization implies.
ትርጓሜ እንደ መነሻ ሆኖ ያገለግላል። ግሪኮች ሲቪላይዜሽን የሚለውን ቃል ከሶስት ቃላት ነው መዘው ያወጡት። እነዚያን ሶስት ቃላት ስንገነዘብ ስልጣኔን አውቶማቲካሊ ከምን ጋር እንደሚያያዝ ለመገንዘብ ያግዛል። የመጀመሪያው ቃል ሲቪስ ይባላል። ሲቪስ
The first word is civis, meaning citizen, a member of a community. The second is civitas, meaning a city or city-state. The third is civilis, from which we get civil or civility, referring to the refined conduct and cultured living. Thus, civilization rests on three key elements.
civility, ስልጡን ባህሪና የኑሮ ዘይቤ ሶስት ነገር
The individual as a member of society, the city as a physical and administrative space, and beyond both, city and citizen, a cultivated mode of life expressed in manners, social systems, and values.
ስልጡን ባህል የኑሮ ዘዬ አንዳንዴ ከተማው ያለ በቅጡ መገልገል የማይችሉ ሰዎች
There are cases when a city exists but its people do not yet possess the refinement or capacity to sustain it. The ancient understanding that civilization consists of people, city, and a cultivated way of life still remains valid today.
ቀደምት ስልጣኔዎች በስሱ ስናይ ዴፊኒሽኑና ስልጡን የተባሉ ሀገራት በወቅቱ ያሳኳቸው ጉዳዮች
To understand this further, we can look back at early civilizations and the contexts that shaped them. The earliest, according to many historians, is the Sumerian civilization. It emerged in Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, and around 4000 BC, making it roughly 6,000 years old today. This early civilization developed between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Its defining achievements were 1. The earliest known written language, 2. Advanced irrigation and agriculture, and 3. Urban settlement and monumental architecture. Many of these remnants still exist. Readable inscriptions, visible structures, and physical artifacts, even if they are weathered by time.
ሁለተኛው ከሱሜሪያን ቀጥሎ የሚገለጸው
Following the Sumerians came the Indus Valley civilization, estimated to have been flourished around 3000 BC, about 5300 years ago, in present-day northern India and Pakistan, along the Indus River. Here, water, people, and city were inseparable. Its notable features include planned urban layouts and sophisticated drainage systems, clear markings of social organization.
መሰረቱ የኢንደስ ወንዝ ነው ወንዝ
Third in sequence is the ancient Egyptian civilization, roughly 3100 BC, about 5100 years old, situated along the Nile Valley in northeastern Africa, distinct from modern Egypt, as ancient Egypt extended further south into Nubia. Its foundation was the Nile River, and its defining achievements were agriculture and monumental architecture. Fourth is the Chinese civilization, commonly dated to around 3000 BC, making it approximately 5000 years old. Located in what is now China, it emerged along the Yellow River Valley, where agriculture and administrative governance developed hand in hand. Across all civilizations, we find common elements: stone, water, and river valleys. Stone was tool, weapon, foundation, and shelter. Rivers sustained life, enabled farming, and gathered people together. From such settlements, villages and cities emerged. Beyond these well-known examples, there were others: the Maya and Inca civilizations in Latin America, ancient Carthage in North Africa, and in East Africa, Nubia, Kush, Punt, and Aksum, among others. Many flourished wherever nature offered abundance. But when we trace civilization back to its beginnings, from settled life to stone cutting and construction to organized living over centuries, we see that only what endures through time can be considered civilization. What is not built to last cannot be inherited by future generations, and this is true everywhere.
Shakespeare, if not the people, what's the city like? City infrastructure ብቻ ሳይሆን
What then are the elements of civilization? One is urban life, the development of cities that enable structured social interaction and organized living. Shakespeare asks, if not the people, what is the city? Meaning, a city is more than buildings. Civilization requires not only infrastructure, but also superstructure, not only roads and buildings, but culture, values, institutions, and artistry. Without both, the city is incomplete. A city becomes truly livable and beautiful could it cultivate those elements in abundance. If we were to ask anyone here, what does culture that is distinctly Addis Ababan look like? We would not receive a single uniform answer. But if we asked, where exactly does the main road from here to Bole pass? How many kilometers is it? Many people would be able to give an approximate or closely matching response. Why then is culture not as easy to quantify or define as infrastructure? Culture is often described as a social brain. The term social brain arises from the fact that on average, the human brain accounts for only about 2% of a person's total body mass. Yet that same small organ consumes about 25% of the oxygen and energy we take in. It weighs only 2%, but it devours 25% of all we eat and breathe. The remaining 75% is distributed to the other 98% of the body. Consider it, within that 2%, containing as many as 30 billion densely packed cells, this brain consumes a quarter of all the oxygen we process. Whether we work or even we merely sit idle, it continues to feed. From an investment perspective, think of it this way. If a person invests 100 birr and gains 25 birr in return, we would recognize that as a result. But someone who cannot perceive where that 25% is going cannot understand where the return lies. And for such a person, the effort may seem pointless, yet it is not. It only appears pointless when one lacks the lens to see value. The fourth and final point is that technology building capacity is itself a capacity. It is the ability to generate solutions to whatever challenge confronts us.
75% የሚሄደው
If our problem is housing, then technology is what allows us to build it. If the challenge is water, ensuring its purity, preserving it, storing it for long periods, then the solutions we develop for those needs are what we call the technology. It does not necessarily have to be or have to mean computers. On what basis do systems of governance come into being? Power, as you know, was born out of humanity's struggle to secure sustenance, to put food on the table and survive. The earliest form of governance emerged from the need to place enough food on the table, to eat and to stay alive. The first surplus that humans ever sought to generate came through hunting. Imagine a man out hunting, perhaps with his wife and young child alongside him, maybe dragging a goat behind him, establishing what we might call a household. But as the family grew, going out to hunt together became difficult. A child crying, a mother caring for the baby, these things slowed the pace. The group could no longer move as quickly as before. When the hunters stayed out late, returning tired and unsuccessful, they came to a realization that there must be division of labor. Thus began a separation of roles. You stay here with the children. I'll go out and hunt. If I return game, we will eat. If I fail, at least you can warm up yesterday's porridge and survive. Through this division of labor, efficiency emerged. He would hunt quickly and return. She would maintain the home. Soon, it was no longer necessary for everyone to go out together. 2, 5, 10, 20 men could go while the rest stayed. The system expanded gradually. Those who hunted worked together. Those who stayed formed settlements. But as communities grew, conflict appeared among those who were left behind. You hit my child, you broke my stool, you damaged my property, arguments arose. When the hunters returned, they often found the settlement embroiled in quarrels. To resolve this, a social structure and the earliest character of governance began to form. Someone was appointed to stay behind, not to hunt, but to maintain order, like a primitive police force or administrator. And this way, governance was born. As people who gathered into communities, there emerged not only development and cooperation, but also crime, conflict, theft, and inequality. To resolve these, laws had to be created. Records had to be kept. Systems of documentation, early technologies of writing were developed to preserve agreements and rules. From humanity's effort to feed itself, to fill the table, to survive, there followed the rise of settlements and the creation of governing structures. And throughout this long process, one thing has always existed: innovation, day after day, new forms of creativity. This is how systems of power came into being. These various models of governance have been described by historians, philosophers, and researchers in different ways. Some examine where a system begins and where it ends, the historical model. Others look through what is called the energy-based model. Among these models is what scholars refer to as the Arnold Toynbee model, named after the author of a study of history written roughly 90 years ago. So Toynbee described the evolution of governance in 4 phases. Like a human being, born, growing, maturing, and eventually dying, power emerges, it expands, reaches its peak, then begins to decline. It ages, weakens, and ultimately dissolves, even if some traces of remnants remain. But the concentrated power, if once held, does not remain forever. After Arnold Toynbee put forward his ideas perhaps after 25 or 26 years. What came to be known as the Tony model or the cyclic model emerged. Later, Colonel King, once he had reworked my earlier base model, produced a scholarly document called The Evolution of Civilization. What he argued in that work is this: no system of power appears suddenly or out of nowhere. Every order draws its form and character from what preceded it. In other words, what is conceived in the present germinates from what existed yesterday. Take the Derg, for example. Its ideology and temperament were born from the monarchical era, from the collapse and decline of the monarchy. It absorbed lessons, and from those lessons it shaped its own identity. This is his point. A system does not arise silently or in a vacuum. When an existing order becomes exhausted, when it degenerates, weakens, or loses capacity, it must reconstitute itself, refine itself, and rise again. What is conceived, therefore, is rooted in what came before, even though later it may expand, grow broader, and develop. But once expansion peaks, conflict follows, because growth brings competition, friction, and struggle. As conflict intensifies and spreads, disintegration and fragmentation sets in. In this way, internal weaknesses become the cause of both rise and fall. Having divided earlier analysis into 7 and then 4 stages, from birth to death, I then added another dimension: conflict, creativity, and scale. This became the basis of my third model. In technological terms, it resembles the Kardashev scale. Kardashev was a Russian scholar who argued that the measure of a civilization's power lies in its level of energy use. He claimed that the stage of dominance of a state can be known through the amount of energy it is able to harness. A zero-type civilization, he explains, is one that has not yet mastered the total available energy of its own planet. Any country that cannot fully utilize Earth's natural energy sources remains at the zero power level.
ከትናንትና ማንነቱ ይጸነሳል። ኮንሲቭ የሚደረገው ከትናንትና ከነበረ ለምሳሌ ደርግ.
What does planetary energy sources mean? It includes volcanic power, hurricanes, El Nino cycles, and more. Since no nation can harness all such sources, he concludes that all countries today are effectively still type 0. A type 1 civilization, he says, is reached when a society becomes capable of fully capturing and using its planetary and solar energy. Type 2 extends beyond the planet. It refers to a civilization that can utilize its full energy output and its entire solar system, aided by technologies like Dyson spheres. Only when the energy of the solar system stars is fully tapped can we say that we have reached Type 2. Type 3 goes farther still. Full utilization of galactic energy, such as that of the Milky Way. Beyond this, more ambitious ideas continue to emerge. What inspires many about the Kardashev scale is that the creation and expansion of energy capacity becomes a driving force for industry, urbanization, agriculture, and technology. In this sense, it serves as a conceptual guide for understanding the trajectory and ambition of civilizations. He says that countries which have not yet developed the capacity to generate energy, even if they have resources, cannot be considered true powers. Energy is what enables societies to produce, to create. If we look only at hydropower, for example, sub-Saharan Africa holds significant potential. Across the continent, there are 15 major dams. The 11th is Takaze, the 7th is Gibe, the 2nd is Koisha, and the first is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Out of the 15, 4 are found in Ethiopia, the 1st, 2nd, 7th, and 11th. Yet even in this, Ethiopia still has a very long way to go in terms of hydropower generation and overall energy capacity. When compared with Africa as a whole, the numbers look promising, but relative to our potential, there remains a vast gap to be filled. Scholars have defined power in many different forms, but when you examine them together, they share a common symbol, a marker, a reference point. The analogy is a stone or a river, a foundation. If we take that global understanding of power and then apply it to ourselves, we see that Ethiopian power has sometimes existed in unified form and sometimes in the form of multiple aggregated polities. When we say Ethiopia, we do not mean merely the map we know today. The same is true of Iraq or even China. Their boundaries have shifted continuously over time. Still, Ethiopian power has had eras of rise and eras of decline. When viewed together, this becomes the interaction of voice and noise, competition between clarity and disruption. When voices rise clearly, when voices overcome noise, when ideas align and accumulate followers, power and progress grow. But when noise overwhelms voice, suppression follows and power begins to fall. When noise and voice travel side by side and neither overcomes the other, stagnation occurs. One step forward, one step backward. How then does voice overcome noise? When what you have, your narrative, your idea stands firm, your narrative, your idea stands firm, your thought, when thought and narration grow together, when leadership and followership align, power and advancement emerge. If we divide Ethiopian power into two broad eras, pre-Aksum and post-Aksum, Aksum has already been widely studied. So let us consider what came before Aksum, roughly 2,500 years ago. Today, approaching 3,000 or 4,000 years, there existed the Punt civilization. Punt held a realm that covered more than half of what is modern Ethiopia, and its strategic center lay along the Red Sea. When Punt declined, the Kushite state rose and took its place. The Kushite civilization once again stretched widely along the Red Sea, as you can see here, extended inland all the way to present-day Sudan. When the Kushite kingdom declined and the Damat polity emerged, there were divisions and separations of power. Yet even then, control of the Red Sea and the Abiy or Blue Nile basin remained a foundational element of all the states that existed within Ethiopia. Later, when Aksum rose to prominence, it built upon what came before and became a great power, one that spread its influence toward southern Arabia and the Indian Ocean. In its time, Aksum was counted among the 4 major empires globally. When we speak of power on the world stage, one of the places most closely associated with monumental stone civilization is Ethiopia itself. For example, if you travel to Aksum, to Yehal, to Lalibela or Sofomer, you will see the deep connection that once existed between stone and human ingenuity. Egypt has its pyramids, monuments that draw millions to witness their scale and serve as symbols of ancient might. Ethiopia's power, too, has similar markers, but because of our own neglect, much of it has not been widely told or recognized. Yet when you look at Lalibela then or now, there is still no engineering like it. We usually think of construction as something that begins by digging downwards. Lalibela, however, has carved from top downward. This shows an entirely different approach and vision. These earlier achievements were made possible by the knowledge, skill, and perseverance of the people of that era and the civilizations they built through the union of stone and human effort. After Aksum came the Zagwe dynasty, and after Zagwe, though the sequence is not always precisely defined, power arose in new centers, first in the Bale region, then later in Gondar, about 4 centuries ago. We still see material evidence of these eras today. Then came the powers of Harar, then Jimma, Shawa, Kafa, Walaita, and Dauro, emerging one after the other across the land. Take Dauro, for instance. The Halalakela structure, around 400 years old today, was built over the course of 47 to 48 years. How was the work organized? One generation was obliged to serve 7 years. A family would send a son for 1 year. He would quarry and cut stone, then return home for 7 years of service. By then, the boy would be 8 years old. He would then be replaced by another, and so on. Through 4 or 5 generations of continuous labor, the structure was completed in just under half a century. All of it required cutting stone, shaping it, and laying it into place. This is the character shared by Ethiopia's historical states, the kind that once we master everywhere, we recognize because we see traces of it here first. So how then did decline set in? How could such civilizations rise to greatness and later falter? There were external causes and internal ones. States fractured, populations grew while supply failed to keep pace. When population and provision do not expand together, conflict follows, and conflict eventually erodes power. When we look at the eras in which power rose in Ethiopia and those in which decline was visible, we can understand it through a simple example: a 4-wheeled vehicle. For it to move from where it stands to its destination, at least 4 essential elements must be working together. First, a vehicle can only move forward if its 4 wheels are proportionate in size. If there are the size of a minibus tire and one is the size of a tractor tire, it will not even move, let alone travel properly. The larger wheel drag the small ones. This is why the tires must match. If one is significantly larger or smaller than the others, the growth or weakness of one will cause the rest to collapse or break down. Second, the wheels must rotate together. If 3 rotate and one does not, the car cannot move forward. The tire that fails to rotate will pull against the others and cause damage. This is what is meant when we say they must be synchronized. Third, the wheels must move in the same direction. If 2 rotate forward and 2 rotate backward, the vehicle will not reach anywhere. Fourth, they must move at equal speed. If tires cannot turn at the same pace, if one is too fast or one is too slow, it leads to friction, breakdown, or derailment. Therefore, for motion to be successful, the 4 wheels require 4 conditions: equal size, synchronized rotation, one common direction, and equal speed. Take this example and apply it to development. If we want Ethiopia to grow, to thrive, and stand firmly in its sovereignty and future, then we must move in balance. A country is said to lag behind when its political and social systems fall below global standards. When compared to others, we advance in technology and economic capability, it remains stagnant. Stagnation in growth, absence of continuous development, slow movement, political turbulence, economic breakdown, these are the visible signs of being left behind, and the roots of this backwardness are forms of decay. The first is institutional decay. For example, if the police, an institution tasked with protecting public peace, fails to do so, loses competence, or loses legitimacy in the eyes of society, institutional decay has begun. If the courts cannot deliver justice, if people go seeking fairness and return without it, if trust in legal institutions fades, that too is institutional decay. This happens when states falter in performing their duties with strength and integrity. The second is cultural decay, when good values begin to erode: respect, trust, loyalty, keeping one's word, integrity, truthfulness. When these weaken and disappear, culture itself begins to fall. A third is economic decay, when economic actors shrink, when businesses collapse, when productivity declines, and when the economy becomes fragile, when debt rises, when what we produce no longer meets what we consume. These become indicators of downward movement. Ethiopia, as I said earlier, once stood ahead in time, yet later became decayed, slowed, weakened, left behind. The pain of losing time is a slow progress, delay, and drift. When time moves forward, while we stand still, many opportunities close behind us. This, for thousands of years, has been one of our central national challenges. Yet there is also hope. Even though we have been delayed, stumbled, stagnated, even though for 3,000 years and more we have risen, paused, fallen, and stood again, the very fact that Ethiopia still exists is itself no small achievement. Despite difficulty, despite historical burden, we are still a nation. We are still many nations and peoples speaking of a shared national purpose. That alone is a strength we must not overlook. So, even though we face serious problems, we are still a country, and the fact that we still sit together, speak together, and think together about rebuilding and moving forward means that there is hope. Our criticism of past failure should not blind us to the possibility of renewal. Alongside what has gone wrong, we must also see what can still rise again. National development faces many kinds of barriers: structural barriers, institutional or systematic barriers, and cultural barriers. Unless we break these barriers, progress will not come, whether at the level of a nation, a region, or a city.
ልማት የሚያመጣ እስከሆነ ድረስ ዕውቀት የሚያመጣ እስከሆነ ድረስ ሰላም የሚረብሽ ከሆነ አታስጠጉ።
These barriers must be broken. Unless the barrier helps to secure peace, unless it contributes to development or expands knowledge, clinging to it is neither useful nor wise. If a barrier instead prevents knowledge from entering, prevents opportunity from flowing, then we must recognize that it harms the very people it claims to protect. The most serious cause of institutional breakdown is resistance to change, people who are unwilling to adjust, to inquire, to read, or to examine new ideas. Anything outside their own preference or comfort zone they reject as unnecessary. This mindset is the root of the problem, and unless we change it, real development will remain out of reach. A second major obstacle to genuine change is society and individuals who abandon what truly troubles them and instead rush to solve what is not difficult. This attitude becomes one of the primary reasons why transformation breaks down. A third barrier is treating the disruption of change itself as an objective. Earlier, we examined how power structures have historically evolved, how people collaborated, how authority was organized globally, and how hierarchies were formed and assessed. After seeing that, when we apply the same lens to our own situation, we can clearly observe that Ethiopia too inherited remnants of these power structures. Why then are we often suspected of plotting against one another? It is because while claiming to share a common purpose, we do not move in step.
ኢትዮጵያ ካለችበት አረንቋ አውጥቶ
One takes a step forward while another holds back. This gap must be narrowed. It requires repairing, adjusting, and defining. If we are truly committed to strengthening Ethiopia's well-being, each of us must push beyond what we are comfortable giving, beyond what fits neatly within our allotted time or capacity. Only by doing so can we consolidate authority and build a stable state. If we manage that, we can lift Ethiopia from its current condition and guide it onto a solid, enduring path. This is the essence of a doctrine of Maddamer, adding together all that strengthens the nation. Ethiopia has history, rich, ancient, and deep, but history alone does not confer prestige. We have a past, but no visible elevating power today. Why? Because history is like a river, fluid, ever moving. It is not static. History flows. It carries things forward. And because it flows, power must also be defined, reshaped, and adjusted, and energized. This, of course, demands effort and hard work for history to flow into our favor. For it to refine us, it requires labor. If we do not work for it, power will not come. Abiy, the Blue Nile, is history. Gerd, however, is power. Gerd is not a victory achieved merely by recounting history. It is a triumph earned by making history. If we repeatedly carry out such work, tireless, forward-looking work, we will not only continue making history, we will secure, sustain, and elevate our national power. History we already possess. Your task, our shared task, is to consolidate power through work. The role of Maddamer on this path toward power begins with repairing what is broken, laying the foundation for the journey ahead, sustaining our gains, and adjusting our course where necessary. How is this achieved? The starting point is the idea. The seed of Maddamer is a concept. It is a seed of thought. If planted at the right time, in the right place, and in the right manner, it germinates. If delayed, the seed does not die, nor does it disappear, but it will not yield the harvest it could have. Believe me, the idea of Maddamer will not die as long as Ethiopia exists. It may be applied differently at different times, but it does not perish. Yet like any seed, if we do not cultivate it when cultivation is needed, it will be dormant. If, however, we use it now and we use it well, it will grow, expand, and even benefit others beyond us. What is it that the seed of Maddamer does not die? Why is it that the seed of Maddamer does not die? Because Maddamer is not merely about learning from the past. It is also about shaping the lens through which we work today and assist Ethiopia of tomorrow. Yesterday says, I refine you, I teach you, but today says, I use what I have learned, I build a foundation, and tomorrow says, because of that foundation, I pass along to my children a more powerful and resilient state. Any government that refuses this principle cannot survive in today's Ethiopia. In the past, perhaps it was possible, but no longer. To understand the times is to understand what now confronts us. A government that cannot grasp the present cannot function, because a changing world does not accept leaders who do not change with it. In a transformed world, only those who transform themselves can connect yesterday to tomorrow. Any leadership that rejects this reality cannot achieve its goals or succeed in any meaningful way. We have repeatedly explained that Maddamer is the summation of ideas, attitudes, and capacities. Maddamer does not mean 1 + 1 = 2 in the ordinary sense. It goes beyond that. It is the result of a combined strength of many contributing elements. Of the foundational concepts of Maddamer, we have highlighted. The first is synergetic capacity. the creation of synergy. Synergy is the productive combination of capabilities. Systematic coherence is essential, and what we lack today is precisely that.
በትልቁ ማሰብ ከትንሽ መጀመር ለምሳሌ ጽዱ ኢትዮጵያን የመፍጠር ግብ ከቢሮ ተጀመረ ከተማ ተባለ ወደ ሀገር እየሰፋ ሄደ ኮሪደር የበጋ ስንዴ ሌማት ግሪን ሌጋሲ ሁሉም ኢኒሺዬቲቭ ጅማሮ አነስተኛ ነበር በሂደት እየፈጠነ እየሰፋ
Thinking big requires beginning small, starting with a seed, nurturing it, strengthening it, and allowing it to grow. And once we speak of speed, there are three kinds of speed to understand. The first is speed, what we call tolota in Amharic, simply the ability to move quickly. But speed can go left or right, forward or backward, upward or downward. It is of movement. Fast, yes, but not necessarily purposeful. It is just momentum. The second is velocity, speed with the correct direction. It is not movement for its own sake, but movement along the right path towards the right goal. The third is acceleration. The continuous increase of speed in that same correct direction. In Amharic, we call this shimtata, the force that builds, that compounds, that multiplies. It is speed, it is direction, and it is the commitment to keep advancing faster and faster.
The right direction መሆን አለበት ያ ፍጥነት ሶስተኛው acceleration ይባላል ወይም ሽምጠጣ ጥድፈት ይባል በአማርኛ
Consider a race. At the starting line, everyone bursts forward together. That is starting speed. But as the race unfolds, some runners begin to tire and fall back. Others hold steady, and a few push harder, increasing their pace. Eventually, you see it clearly. The runner who maintains both effort and acceleration pulls ahead. Those who follow behind may still be strong, but they cannot easily close the widening gap. To catch someone like Mo Farah, for example, you don't just need speed, you need consistency and the power to constantly accelerate. Only then, over time, do you begin to see the difference. The gap narrows and the result becomes visible. What does this mean for us? At the beginning of any effort, everyone gathers, but if we continue without interruption, holding fast to the sound ideas and the good intentions we started with, and those who once dismissed us from the distance will eventually become observers. And when we finish, they will become admirers. They will say, I never thought it would turn out like this. I was not told clearly. I misunderstood. Yet the issue was not lack of exploration. The issue was their unwillingness to believe. In truth, we were the ones following a clear vision. What is expected of you and me is this. The good seed is planted, the speed with which we began, and the dedication we committed to at the start must carry us all the way until the fruit is finally ripe without stopping. We must hold firmly to the right idea, work with daily discipline, and demonstrate results through action. If we can do this, the scattered fruits, the results that once seemed uncertain or fragile, will begin to gather. They will multiply. They will mature in a way that brings prosperity to our citizens. They will grow in strength, expand in visibility, and produce outcomes worthy of our effort. This is the power of thinking big, starting small, and preserving without wavering. Through that, the work moves forward and the results speak for themselves.
ያን ማድረግ ስንችል አብዛኛው የተራገፈ ብልጽግና የምንጨብጠው የምናሸተው የምናየው ፍሬ ለዜጎቻችን እየሆነ ይሄዳል ማለት ነው።